yeah, so just big congratulations to you all for making it this far. It was really exciting to read through your applications and the work that you've been done. And it's honestly an honor to meet some of you, to meet all of you. And I'm really excited to be working with you on this workshop. So just to give you an idea around what we're doing today, as I said, we've put aside 90 minutes to help you prepare for the interview that is coming up in the next few weeks with our IC. And so this presentation is split into 3 different parts. The first part is we're going to be sort of looking at next steps, what the interview entails, who's going to be interviewing you guys, what the setup looks like, etc. And you can ask any questions that you want about that. Then we're going to go into some sort of tips around storytelling. You've all sent in absolutely brilliant applications, and you can write brilliant applications, but sort of telling your story and presenting what you've done is a different thing. So we want to sort of help you and support you to be able to do that effectively. So we're just going to give you some tips and tricks for great storytelling. And then we want to sort of leave the last portion of this this sort of workshop for questions. I can see there's lots and lots of questions coming in to Habib, and I thought it'd just be a perfect place just for you guys to just sort of ask them, and we can answer them directly. So that's pretty much the agenda in a bit more detail. We'll just start off with some introductions. Unfortunately, we can't do individual introductions, or we will be here all day. So we will organize perhaps something later where you can kind of chat with one another, because a lot of what you're doing is it's quite similar. I can see some synergies that could happen between the different organizations. So we will sort of facilitate introductions after this workshop. As I said, we're going to discuss next steps. We'll do an overview of the interview. Also, I thought it would be really interesting for you guys to sort of have a general overview of the assessment. So what we're looking for. But I think also this would be really valuable for you guys moving forward when you're thinking about applying for funds elsewhere. Just to get into the mind of a funder, what are they looking at? How are they structuring things, etc. I think that might be quite interesting for you guys. And then we'll go into storytelling techniques. We might do a small activity. Bear in mind, this is Habib's and I's first time doing a workshop online, so we will see how that goes. Then a Q&A before we end. Okay, so before we jump in properly, I guess we should introduce ourselves. You all know Habib a little bit since you've been sort of emailing with him, but I'll let him give you a proper introduction. Over to you, Habib.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's great to meet you all in person, virtually. Right. My name is Habib. I support Kieran as Impact and Innovation Manager. We've been working in building out the labs, and we're very happy to see the organizations that have pulled through, and we'll be working together over the next few months or years in building out evidence and scaling your innovations. Thank you. Kieran.
Thanks, Habib. My name's Kieran. I'm the Senior Impact and Innovation Manager here at GSF, so sort of taking the lead on delivering the labs. Background-wise, done a lot of work with commercial accelerators across the world. So love this space very much, and excited about supporting you guys to sort of scale out your innovations. We wanted to give you guys a bit of a flavor of who's in the room. So these are the different organizations that have made it into the shortlist. You will see there's more than 12 because some of you guys have submitted a proposal that included more than one organization, so in partnership with different organizations. But just to give you a flavor of who's on this call, we've got a very impressive list. As I said before, I will facilitate various conversations or perhaps connections later on, but unfortunately we can't give everyone the opportunity to do introductions right now, or we'll be here all day. Okay, so let's just think about the next step. So after this workshop, we thought what would be really, really good is to give you guys the opportunity to have a one-on-one 30-minute feedback session with either Habib or I. So once we've kind of gone through this and you can implement some of the advice that we give you to build out your presentations, you can chat with Habib and slot in 30 minutes with us. And that will begin from June 16th, and that'll be up until, you know, whatever you've decided, whenever you've told us when you're available for your interview. And this is just an opportunity for you to sort of tweak various bits and pieces for your presentation. Then interviews will be slotted between July 4th and July 15th, and you will receive your slot next week. We will make announcements of the final 3 organizations by August 1st, and we'll begin the contracting phase in August. Public announcements will then be made in September, and the official beginning of the lab will be sort of end October, early November. We will confirm that date with everybody in the coming weeks. And just to give you we will be doing the lab offsite in either Johannesburg or Kenya. And this is because, as most of you know, we have an annual meeting, and the annual meeting is going to be in Joburg this year. So we're just kind of thinking about logistics around how best to do that. So we will let you know what sort of this lab offsite looks like and where it's going to be in the coming few months. Then we have the virtual element of the labs, which will then begin in November. So more detail on these final 2 pieces to come. Right, so the interview panel. I think you would have found all of this information in your information pack. We have an investment committee made up of some great people. Ashti, as you all know, who's the CEO of Global Schools Forum. Audrey Passot, who is a finance specialist at Jacobs Foundation. Cedrine Gizin, who's the Associate Director at UBS Optimus Foundation. Dr. Albert de Pigny, who is sort of very, very central to a lot of innovative programs in Sierra Leone and works in the government there. Tidse Kore, who's the head of education at the Vitol Foundation, and Noam Angrist, who is the founder of Young Love and has an extensive track record of doing male-based projects across sub-Saharan Africa. So a really, really great bunch of people who've had lots of experience with funding education programs or sort of monitoring at education programs. Alongside a member from the investment committee, one of these people, one of the members of the GSF team will also be sitting in your interview. So that would be either Elena Lepkan, who is Director of Impact and Innovation here at GSF, me, or Purnima, who is the Impact and Innovation Manager at GSF. And she will be corresponding with you later on next week to sort of finalize your interview slots. So in terms of what the interview looks like, it'll be about 45 minutes long. We're expecting sort of a bit of a buffer for the welcome, just accounting for people being late, etc. And we're going to go straight into the presentation. And we're giving everyone about 10 minutes for their presentation. Then we'll probably allocate about 20 minutes for questions from the IC and questions from GSF. And I think we've given you sort of an interview guide in terms of the types of things you may be asked. They may go off road and ask something completely that's not in that guide. So do prepare for other questions. I'm sure all of you have been interviewed by funders in the past, so you must know some of the questions that may come up. We also want to give you the opportunity to ask questions. This is a brand new program. No one's really doing scale-based programs like we are, so I'm sure you've got a ton of questions around how we're structuring things, etc. So, you know, prepare a few questions for us, and then we'll give that sort of 2 minutes to close. We've had lots of questions around how many people, how many representatives from your organization can come along. We're saying no more than 3, just because I think if we've got too much representation, interviews can tend to take a little bit longer. And we've said 3 because some organizations have applied as a partnership of 3. So it would be great to have representation from each individual. Thinking about who would be best placed, someone who understands the organization, vision-wise, funding, so perhaps a founder, director, somewhere more senior, but also if you're thinking about, MEL is really important to us, so the monitoring evaluation component. So if you want to sort of bring that individual along that really understands your MEL structure and strategies, that would always be helpful, because I'm sure there'll be questions for you, especially if you have Noam sitting in your panel team. As I said, you'll have 1 IC member interviewing you and 1 GSF team member. Okay, any questions on that before I move to the next part? No? Perfect. Okay, so what are we assessing you on? So we're very old school when it comes to thinking about sort of assessment, and IDEO is our guiding star. So IDEO has developed, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you must have seen this before, has developed this sort of trifecta, if you like, in terms of what good innovation looks like. What if you're thinking about investing in innovation and thinking about scaling in innovation, what are the things that you need to be looking for? And this is what they consistently point to. Strong innovation has good feasibility, good viability, good desirability. So in your application, we asked a lot of questions that sort of looked at the desirability. Does your user benefit from the solution? In the interview, we will assess all 3 components, but we'll be specifically looking at viability. Is this solution sustainable financially? But we also want to understand is, does the solution build on the strengths of the organization's current operations? So does it have the right capacity, the right team, the right structures and processes in place to take this to the next level? And is there enough sort of support financially to get this going? So yes, we will address feasibility, but we're also, we're really focusing on that feasibility viability component in these interviews. So the next slide sort of breaks that down in a bit more detail. And as I said before, I will share these slides with you. So there's a little bit more detail around what exactly we're looking at. And as I said, feasibility, viability, those are the big areas that we're really focusing on. This general framework, I think, is something that most funders tend to use, even if they don't know about it. So we're always assessing, how well the innovation is working, are the people that it was intended for using it, and is it useful for them? Does the organization have the strength to be able to carry this to scale? And that is not just from a funding perspective, but also from a team perspective. So these are the kind of 3 components that are very much looked at by most organizations thinking about funding. Okay, any questions around assessment before we move forward? Nope, can't see any. Nope, perfect. Things are going really, really well, really fast. All right then, so why storytelling? So this, as I said before, I've worked in the commercial space for a very long time, commercial accelerators. And this is something that is religiously taught, if you like. I haven't seen it so much in our space, but I could be wrong. So I just thought it'd be nice to kind of share a few tips and tricks for good storytelling. So the reason that we think storytelling, or we know storytelling is more effective, is that people, one, they just remember stories more so than cold hard facts. If you think about the investors or the funders, they're listening to lots and lots of pitches, lots and lots of presentations, and like any human, they switch off. So it's really important to engage them. And one of the best ways to engage people is to try to create some sort of emotional connection. And it's been found that people feel connected to a character. And if you give them a story about a specific character, they get quite invested in that character's success. So storytelling is the perfect way to be able to sort of create these characters, and we'll demonstrate how in a bit, and sort of take the investors on a bit of a journey. Also, they're really, really great at explaining complex issues. Sometimes when you're throwing cold, hard facts at people, they switch off and, you know, they get lost and more questions arise than are answered. And then, you know, you go off on a tangent instead of talking about the real issues, and it becomes something completely different. So we think that storytelling is a really appropriate way to sort of begin your presentation, and then you can sort of go into the more nitty-gritty. So we had sent out a video, a TED Talk video by Fred Swaniker. Did everyone get the chance to watch it? And you can just shout out if you want.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Yes,
We watched it.
Excellent.
Yep.
Perfect. A sea of yeses. That's what I like to hear. So just a quick question. What do you think makes Fred a good storyteller? Anyone?
He drew from his own personal life, his own personal experiences, which made it compelling right from the beginning. I guess that was definitely a highlight.
Yep, absolutely. He told a story of himself. Anything else?
I think he very quickly.
Yeah, I think he continues to come. Oh, go ahead.
Go for it, Reshma.
So you go, you're.
I think he very quickly paints a picture that's like outside of himself as well. So he's painting a picture across Africa, and not just about one place, and kind of casting the context very effectively. Like through these stories, he hones in on the leadership, and the crisis of leadership, and just gives multiple examples.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, you hit that on the head in terms of, you know, he starts off with his story, but he sort of demonstrates that it's not an isolated story, and is able to provide, various stories of this specific problem all over parts of Africa, and then goes into that leadership component. Yeah, absolutely. Reshma, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, sort of similar. He comes back to that story. He doesn't just tell the story at the beginning and then turn to data. He uses it as a touch point at numerous points throughout.
Absolutely, continuously linking back to the main problem. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else?
I think he's very skilled at telling the story in a way where you want to hear what happens next. So I guess he's been very clear about what statements he wants to make that he'll use to draw people in and create that kind of energy to kind of stay tuned and hear what's going to happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're completely right there. He's very engaging, he's very clear, he's very structured, and he continuously has this thing that he points back to. Any other comments?
I think I would just also go on, Sharantan. Nice to see you.
I think the ability to move from the micro to the macro, from the past to the present and the future, the how smoothly he does it is really remarkable. So when you get a really good complete picture, a context, the history, the future, the hope, everything, he has stitched everything together very beautifully.
Absolutely, and he does it within I think it's a 30-minute TED Talk, which is a really impressive thing to be able to do, to give you that sort of macro, micro sort of picture. I think, Iro, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, and he doesn't seem like he's talking really fast. Whilst he's doing he packs so much in, and yet he's kind of speaking at a really nice pace, which is easy to listen to.
No, absolutely, he's definitely very easy to listen to. I don't know if you found, I usually can switch off after about 5 minutes of a story, but with him I was 13 minutes, is that it? Are you going to keep going? But yeah, hopefully we can mold you into these Fred Swaneker-like storytellers by the end of this workshop.
There was one more takeaway that I had,
Yeah.
which was when I look at countries, especially in South Asia right now, Sri Lanka as an example of a country that was doing really well and got completely damaged by a very, very bad leadership. The context that he paints of micro, macro, and then the ability to extrapolate, because he's laid such a strong foundation, and extrapolate this to different regions and understand and really grasp the importance of what he's saying comes out really clearly. So, I mean, I can completely think about why what he's saying is important in the context and the cultures that I operate in.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right there. He's very, very knowledgeable and very good at demonstrating his understanding of the problem. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit in about sort of 10 minutes. But I want you to sort of remember that. And I think this is a question we asked in the application, you know, problem solution. Can you tell us how this kind of, what's your core problem? Tell us, you know, the details of your problem, etc. And this is going to be a very, very important thing that you know, anywhere you go when you're thinking about funding, etc. That funders are going to ask. They want to make sure that you understand the problem, and that problem is large enough for you to make some serious impact. And he does that really, really well. So he links everything back to this specific problem and demonstrates it from, you know, the size of, as a child, his perspective of the problem, but also you know, it being a massive problem and its impact on wider society. But we'll discuss that in a little bit. But yeah, I think you will sort of understand and see the core components of Fred's great storytelling skills. So I think we can all agree that he's highly structured, he's empathetic and relatable, and he's very simple and clear. So if we're thinking about what makes good stories, would you agree that these components are key? You can shout out if you want. Or would you say there's something else? I'm going to take that as a no. So we can move on. So yeah, for us, and what I've seen generally, some of the best storytellers are able to sort of include these three components within their stories: highly structured, highly empathetic, make it a little bit relatable, and use very simple and clear language so that the audience doesn't get lost. So if we think about structure initially, as I said to you before, your presentations are going to be 10 minutes long. And like any story, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if we think a little bit about the template that we'd sent before, the beginning, middle, and end consists of the first section being the potential of change. So that's your beginning. And this is where you really go into your problem. And then the middle, why are you best placed to drive change? And this is kind of thinking about your organization successes, your team capacity, your various revenue models, etc. The skills models, etc. And how the operational side of things. And then you've got your end. What support do you need to drive this change? Obviously, this TED talk that we've shown you isn't an official pitch. It's a great story, but it's not an official pitch. But you should always end every single pitch with your ask. How can your funder go on the journey with you? And what do you need from them? And how have you thought about, you need to demonstrate that you've clearly thought about what they're offering and how integral that is, and the various milestones you will achieve based on their support. So when you're thinking about timing these various pieces, the beginning is very, very important. And so you should allocate a decent amount of time to that beginning part. So you can see, we've all said it, right? He really understands the problem. He's really good at sort of like looking at the micro and placing himself within in these different contexts. And that was highly engaging. So you want to set the scene and you want to sort of really demonstrate that you've understood that problem and that your solution actually fits, that there is success with this innovation. So I would really spend quite a bit of time really going deep, but being specific and relevant, not sort of going off on tangents here and there. Then the middle. So once you've set the scene, you've set the foundation, then it's like, so why exactly are you best placed to drive that change? And that's when you can really start to talk about your general organizational success and you know, the strong components of your team. That's your people, as well as the various, you know, if you have a working revenue generation model, that's always good. But also, you know, thinking about how much funding you've raised and how many partnerships you've built to raise funding, and also mentioning various partnerships to help you scale. That's a really, really core component. And then finally, that ask. And remember I was talking about desirability, feasibility, viability earlier on. This is where those different pieces come in. So again, as I said, I will share this slide with you so you have an idea of how we're thinking about everything. So as I said, the problem is arguably one of the most important pieces. It's right at the beginning. With anything, you've got about 8 seconds to engage people. So you want to make sure that you start on the right foot. So one thing that I really love about Fred's video is he acknowledges the problem is complicated and multi-layered. He really demonstrates that he gets it. So you trust him. I would trust him to go and try to solve this problem because he gets it really, really well. And so you want to be able to do that. If you can kind of in some way figure out how to describe or relay your knowledge of the various layers, its root causes, etc., that will really, really help to kind of set that foundation. I know a lot of the organizations on this call have teacher training programs. You want to demonstrate how that relates to sort of overall learning outcomes. I've seen in some of the applications that link wasn't very strong. There's a lot of assumptions that, you know, as people in education, we know that, but sometimes you just need to kind of say it so that, you know, we're all on the same page. You want to sort of ensure that you can, you know, this problem is large. So funders and investors are excited about funding projects or projects that are solving problems that are in multiple contexts. So if you can demonstrate that this is a fairly large problem, like Fred has done, that makes funders super excited. And you've got to also share why the problem matters. So what happens if this problem doesn't get solved? You know, what are we going to do then? So that this is a nice way to kind of segue into the next part of your presentation, which will then begin to discuss the solution. So one thing that you've got to make sure that you do is explain why the solution is better than the status quo and anything else out there. So it's an opportunity for you to demonstrate that you understand the competitive landscape. I'm not saying, you know, get your full competitive landscape out and go through it, etc. But think of a great way to relay that information, that you understand what's currently out there and you can clearly articulate your value. Why are you better than what's out there and the status quo? Are you making things harder? So this is another thing that funders and investors get a little bit nervous about. Is like, we've seen so many great innovations, but some actually make life harder. So you want to demonstrate that you've looked at that component and you understand that, you know, new stuff can be highly disruptive, but you've thought about how this fits in well into your context and how it isn't as disruptive. So the solution also that you talk about must effectively address the various points made that, you know, about the problem. So as I said, problems can be multi-layered. you know, there's root causes, etc. Sometimes I've seen presentations where they've suggested, you know, an overall problem and then just given us a blanket solution, and you can't quite see the link. So, you know, make sure that you're effectively sort of making those links. If you're saying that the problem is learning loss, and if you look at the root cause, it's because teachers aren't trained. We are doing, you know, a program that's specifically for teacher training math, and this is how it supports learning loss overall. So keep linking things back and forth and try to make it as easy and seamless as possible. And I guess one of the best ways to talk through your problem solution is to sort of build characters, build that empathy element. So Fred does this by talking about himself. You can do this by creating various characters of perhaps students that you know of, that have sort of worked through the programs. And if you're not directly on the ground working with these things, perhaps speak to the people that are, so they can give you some of these stories. You want to try and sort of create that initial sort of emotional connection, but also think about like users and beneficiaries. So one thing that I've seen as well, which I mentioned earlier, is that this funding opportunity is specifically for supporting learning loss of students, right? So if you are delivering a teacher training program, how do you incorporate the student into this story? How do you make that connection? You can have more than one character, but really be cognizant of the fact that you must relate it back to the student. So think about how they can fit into your entire story. And the best way to do that is to be like, you've got your sort of end beneficiary, which is the student, and then you've got users who could be parents, who could be teachers, etc. And then sort of work backwards and think about their various stories, and then you can build from there. Another great thing that tends to work when you're telling stories is thinking about relevant details that can bring your story to life. So instead of, and obviously you don't want to go into too much detail about absolutely everything, be very specific about, where you think impact could be felt. And one is like, we want to know about how well learning outcomes have been improved, etc. So you can go into a lot of detail about, specific things like grades falling, and, you be specific about percentages of grades falling and how you've been able to sort of improve that. So get specific about the important things and pull out relevant details. But also make sure that you back this with data. This helps to demonstrate the size of the problem. So I would start with this kind of story piece, going through the problem solution, but then just, say something around, this isn't an isolated situation. 84% of children, etc., age 3 to 5, blah, 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 blah. Think about how you can then sort of back all that story with the data that can demonstrate the size of the problem. And also make sure that the data is relevant. Don't confuse people with too many stats. I've seen some presentations where, there's tons of stats and tons of writing on the slides, and then you're talking over those slides with more, and it just tends to confuse people. So, try to have as little as possible on each slide, perhaps 1 or 2 stats to sort of make your point around this being a massive problem. Okay, so again, still on the problem solution here, still on our beginning phase. Something that I also noticed a little bit in some of the applications is sometimes we forget to talk about the actual solution and make assumptions that people just, that it's, we talk around the solution instead of actually about the solution. So it's important to sort of make that clear. This is what our solution is. And if you want to use infographics, etc., go for it. I think it's a great way to relay information. I also know that, there's not plenty of time for you to sort of be messing around on Adobe or whatever and building out infographics. So if you've already got something, stick it in. If you don't, a couple of bullet points to quickly go over, like, what exactly is the solution? How does it work? And why is it special? So I think TAL has done a really nice sort of overview of theirs, you know, a nice quick infographic, TAL support pieces, TAL in the classroom, 3 steps, and then their learning outcomes. So something very simple and easy for an audience to digest. Also, just separate information out. So for example, with the problem solution, you can make that 2 slides. So it just makes it easier to follow and keep it short and concise. So there's not an application, this presentation. I'm sure you know some of this stuff, so I'm sorry if this is if I'm sort of repeating things that you already know. Okay, so the beginning essentially should just follow these basic rules that we've discussed. Yeah, so I thought we could do a little activity, a little bit of sort of storytelling. So I will let Habib introduce this activity.
Hello again. Yeah, so we thought to introduce a small activity. It's actually very simple, but just helps. Helps one in us meeting each other. Since, for example, we're going to do the introduction at the start. So some bit of interaction between everyone to learn a few things about what we do and how we do it. So this session is around character, designing, understanding the beneficiaries of your solutions. So the first step is identifying the beneficiaries of a selected solution. So I'll be creating 4 groups. So in each group, you have representatives from different organizations. This is very random, so it's very possible we have 2 people from the same organization in a group. So please, to make this easy, simply select the organization earliest in the alphabetical order to work with. Yeah, so when you select that organization, we'd like to know who the beneficiary is, how the organization is solving, what the problem of that beneficiary is, and how the organization is solving that problem. So we want you to build a story around that, something similar to what Fred has done, something empathetic, simple, and very clear. I would like you to pass that in 2 minutes. So the person who will be presenting will not be from the organization that is selected. So select someone who is not from the organization to, after you've completed the teamwork, to share that story with us in the presentation we'll be holding after the breakout session. So the breakout session is going to last for 15 minutes. And subsequently, when we rejoin the session, I would have a representative from each group sharing the story of the selected organization. Please, is that clear? Okay. All right.
Just to repeat, we're giving you 15 minutes to in breakout rooms. There's going to be 4 different groups, and your job is to build a story for one of the participating organizations on their problem solution. So thinking about who that character is, who that beneficiary is, and how would you construct that sort of problem solution story. And we're giving you 15 minutes to do that, and then we'll do some presentations afterwards. If you want, I would quickly take a quick picture of this activity screen, so what's on your screen, so that you've got the instructions before you head off into your groups. But yeah, any questions before we head out?
So yeah, please have fun with it and have a nice time meeting other candidates. All right, so I'll be opening up the rooms now. Please have a great time. Welcome back, everyone.
That was a really cool exercise. Thank you.
Ah, that's nice.
I think we need to do it for all the organizations.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Thank you.
We'll definitely give you the opportunity, and then in the one-on-one sessions, you can, if you go and do it with your teams, come back in the one-on-one session and we'll give you some feedback.
Right, so I just give us a few seconds to settle in, and we can have volunteers go. I believe each team has, or each room has a representative. So who'd like to go first? I will have just 2 minutes per person, please, so we could finish this in time.
I'll go first, get it over with.
Okay.
Like school days. This is really fun. I am speaking for Gyanshala, and I've learned all I've learned the last 15 minutes, so glad we only have 2 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to tell a story. So I'd like everyone to imagine Geeta. Geeta is a teacher at a low-cost or low-fee school in India, and she is overworked. She wants to do right by her students and do the best work she can, but she's teaching 4 different grade levels that need an hour of preparation each. So she can't do all of that and teach her classes at the same time. Gyanshala helps to solve this problem by helping Geeta prepare her lessons at a high quality. Gyanshala helps with a curriculum, a daily plan that aligns with the standards in India, and a holistic set of resources that she can use in her classroom to help her students succeed and to pare down on the time that she needs to prepare. And Geeta is not alone. Our estimates lead us to think that 5 to 6 million teachers are in Geeta's position in India, teaching at a low-cost school that is often under-resourced and in high poverty areas, serving students with an intense amount of need. I don't have a good closing. That's the main thing.
Whoa, that was very good. Give Gyanshala your money.
Thanks, Faith.
Hope I did it justice. I don't have an ending, I realized halfway through. Oh yeah, give us the money. That's fair.
Who wants to go next?
I can go next.
Okay.
For purposes of introduction, my name is Claude Kandem from Dignitas, based in Nairobi, Kenya. And I want to introduce us to a girl called Maya and her dad called Batsa. And Maya is a 6-year-old girl attending primary education or basic education in Nepal. And her dad is a 47-year-old teacher in her school. And Maya just doesn't have any motivation at all to go to school. Number one, she's demotivated because she's unable to connect to her teachers, including her dad. Her dad is equally demotivated, and that's Batsa, because he feels that so much has changed over the years, and he's no longer sure why he's a teacher. He feels he lacks the will, and he lacks the skill to do what it is that he loves most. He wanted to transform the lives of many young people, including his daughter, but he is unable to do that because the curriculum, how the curriculum is framed, the unavailability of textbooks, and the training that he obtained was so textbook based, could only allow him, such that he believes over his many years of teaching that the only way he can teach is with a textbook. But over the recent years, things have begun to change since interacting with the Collaborative School Network, who have introduced simplified lesson plans, the effect of which has seen Batsa engage his learners more. He is more disengaged to the textbooks and is more intentional about his impractical experiences that his learners can relate to and that he can relate to. The learners are more engaged in class. They are learning through interactions and through play and through other interventions, and this has made learning more interesting. Batsa is at a point where he feels that his dream is awakening again because he's having the influence over his learners and over his classroom, with the interventions then from the Collaborative School Network. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's also awesome.
Can I quickly just give some feedback? We're going to do lots of feedback in the one-to-one. So just my Rashma, really good. I'll give you some feedback too. Rashma, really good on Gyanshala. One thing that I would advise is just think a little bit about the student as well. If we're thinking about learning outcomes specifically for the student, you did a great story of Geeta, but who is that child behind it as well, and what's the link between the teacher and the student? I saw that Claude did that, which is excellent, but I guess, Claude, we can sort of tighten up on the more relevant details, and just like sort of, yeah, well, I mean, obviously we gave you 15 minutes, so but yeah, that's something that we can work on, is just tighten up on the kind of more relevant details. Sometimes we have we go off on a tangent a little bit and get lost in our own story, so we want to just try and give to yourself 2 or 3 bullet points that you want to continuously follow. I'm going to be quiet now, and I promise we'll give you more feedback when we do our one-to-ones.
Yeah, so just to find out too, I think we have 2 more rooms to go.
Yeah, I can go next.
Okay.
So I'd like you all to think about a young girl called Margaret. She's 7 years old and at primary school in Kenya. Before COVID, Margaret went to school and was taught through rote. The classroom was really bare. She was sat in rows. The teacher seemed very stressed and overwhelmed, and would often lose her temper and use the cane. So it was quite a frightening and boring environment to be in. And Margaret really didn't like going to school. Then COVID hit, and Margaret didn't have any opportunities to learn at home. She just helped her mother out with chores and was just really bored. Once the schools opened again, it was like a breath of fresh air. Suddenly the classrooms looked different. There were more resources. The tables were set up so that Margaret could sit with her friends and work in a group. The teacher was much more cheerful, and the lessons just seemed much more structured. The cane had gone, and if the children misbehaved, the teacher would use positive methods to get the children to do what they were supposed to do. So there would be nice rewards. Margaret's grades improved, and Margaret also really enjoyed coming to school. And she also noticed when she went home and spoke to her friends who went to other schools in the communities, they'd seen the same change in their teachers and were all loving going to school. All right. Yeah, so I think that's it. Hannah, you got anything to add?
Oh, okay.
Great job, Abigail. Thank you. I'm going to refrain from giving feedback. We'll do this in the one-to-ones.
The final person.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. So I will be talking about the impact model, the story of CSN, right? So I have a question for all of you. How would you feel if your future is already scripted? If all that you will turn out to be is a sorry statistic on an intellectual academic report? If you can't think how it feels, then that's privilege. Rajesh is one of the 23 million students served by Nepal's public education system who face this reality. In a few years, he will be part of a very particular statistic, which says 80% of the students in Nepal get a score which is below grade C. The problem here lies in the early years education that students receive, and therefore they drop out. What are the other reasons behind it? Why does this happen? So there's an absolute lack of public trust. There are poorly skilled teachers, and there's no connect between the communities and the school. This is where CSN comes in. CSN works in public schools to improve student learning by working closely with school leaders and school management committees. What do we bring to the table? We build a vision of the education system, school by school. We improve school management by improving decision making and co-creating school development plans with the team. We are building a high quality cadre of government school teachers. We improve classroom teaching through teacher skilling in engaging classroom activities and activity-based teaching. The third, we are building classroom pedagogical content. We provide lesson planning support to enable high quality classrooms in public schools of Nepal. And finally, we are nurturing a caring child-centric ecosystem. We are building strong parent community engagement that puts the child at the center and their learning at the center of the ecosystem and how it revolves. And within no time, our work has produced exemplar results. We have already led to a 15% increase in student learning. And in terms of classroom, in terms of enrollment, school enrollment has shot up by 200% since 2015. So that's the story of CSN, and that's the problem we are solving, saving an impending economic crisis in Nepal. Thank you.
Excellent job,
Thank
Shivapriya.
you very much.
One thing that I think we can all learn from Shivapriya is that he initially engaged us with a question. And I think that's a really, really good way to sort of get the attention of your the funder, the investor, or anyone that you're speaking to, is just like place them in that situation. And I'm sure he got all of your attention with that question. So that's always a really good tactic. Good job, everybody. That was really, really awesome. And I hope that was useful for you guys. We will, as I said, we will sort of continue this particular activity in a bit more detail when we do those one-to-ones. But yeah, great job for a 15-minute task. Okay, so it's 10 past, so I'm going to move us along a little bit.
Kiran, you're on mute.
Sorry, guys, workshopping on Zoom. Something that I think is super useful when you're thinking about profiling your characters is building personas. So this is something, again, that we use quite heavily in the commercial space, and I think we use it a fair bit in this space, but isn't as prevalent. But if you're struggling to think about that particular character, it's always worth making a little profile about them. And the key things that you can focus on are, a small biography, their needs, and the most important thing, their pain points. So this can sort of help you sort of, when you're thinking about the different stakeholders and who you want in your story, creating these little profiles with your teams can be quite a useful exercise. As I said, I'll be sharing all these slides, so if you want to use this template, you can. Sorry, struggling with the tech today. All right, so I think we've conquered the beginning to an extent. Then obviously the next part is the middle. So why are you best placed to drive change? So different people, different organizations do this differently because each organization has different strengths, and you really want to showcase those strengths. The key thing that you want to do is demonstrate how the innovation builds on your current organizational capability. As we all know, this is not an early stage grant, this is a scale grant. So you want to demonstrate some sort of organizational capability and strength. There are 4 things that I recommend that you cover. First being vision. We want to see that the organization has a fairly audacious vision, and your innovation, so whatever you've created, aligns with that vision. Sometimes I've seen organization, missions and innovations that, don't make sense for that organization, and you're just thinking like, how are you effectively going to deliver that if you don't have the skill and capacity or the drive to do that. So make sure you can demonstrate that link, and also just you want to talk a little bit about scale. Obviously, we're going to build out your scale strategies, etc., through the program. So we're not expecting perfect scale strategies, but just demonstrate, you're thinking about scale. That's a really important part to your overall vision, and it's built into your organization. So you want to demonstrate that. demonstrate the value of your team. So funders, investors always invest in people. And if they can see strength in your team, that's a really, really important thing. So make sure that you showcase the strength of your team. As you all know, and I'm pretty sure you've had this component come up time and time again, is funders want to make sure that whatever they're investing in is going to be sustainable, that it is going to continue. They don't want to just kind of provide money to a one-off thing. And something that indicates that is other investments, other funding opportunities that you've lined up. If the innovation is super early, is earlier on in its stage, you can demonstrate funding for different other projects that your organization is running. So you want to demonstrate that you have the capability to raise funds. And even if you've got a revenue model, a for-profit revenue model, you can demonstrate that as well. It doesn't, no one's going to be upset with you if you don't have that. That's not like a core characteristic. If you do have it, stick it in. All we want to see is that you are able to sustain yourself, and that this innovation isn't just going to be a one-off and tail off in a couple of years. Also, just kind of your capacity and your resources. It's kind of, I guess, links a little bit to the team element that we mentioned. But prior to that, we were just talking about the strength of your team, the skills, etc. But do you have the capacity to actually drive this forward? Do you have the resources to do this? Scale is, it's a multi-year sort of adventure, if you like. But you must have, and it's a fairly intensive thing as well. So we want to see if you're already thinking in that direction. Is your organization strong enough at this particular juncture to take this path? And that is demonstrated by your current capacity, your resources, etc. So these are the 4 things I would suggest you try to cover in your sort of middle section. If you wanted to miss out something, it could be this last bit, because I guess you can sort of embed that into your team skills element. Definitely talk about your funding, definitely talk about expertise and knowledge, and also vision, super, super important. I know that we've sort of mentioned lots and lots of things so far. So I would suggest that, tops 6 slides. So maybe problem solution slide, and you give yourself 2 slides for the middle, and then perhaps 1 slide for the end. The end is super easy, very, very simple. And it's just demonstrating why you need our help and what you're going to do with it. So all of you are submitting budgets, which is excellent. So we don't need another breakdown of your budget. I think what will be useful here is just milestones. So, when you think you'll spend X and what that will mean. So I would just kind of like, key milestones around sort of various funding, and when you think you're going to need an extra piece of an extra injection of money and where that's coming from, etc. So I would, in this particular side, just say, yep, so we want 100 grand, you've seen our budget. And you can also refer to that budget will be in front of them. They will have access to that. So you can sort of refer back and forth to that and be like, we would like, this particular piece then, because we want to fund this piece to reach this milestone. Unfortunately, I don't have any examples of this, but I can try and find you some so that you can sort of have a look at what people have done for this particular slide. And that's it. That's it. So as I said before, 6 slide tops, 2 for the beginning, so problem solution, perhaps 2 for the middle, and then 1 for that last ending piece. All right, I'm going to hand over to Habib to go through the next bit.
Yeah, so this is going to be quick as we round off this session. So basically, these are just tips for your slides and a few more about how you present. So as much as possible, ensure the slides are as clear and simple as possible. The less text, the better. And try to highlight the very important text. So, but also always remember that you are the center of attraction, not the slides. So as much as possible, do not distract the listener from you with your slides. So the slides should help you rather than distract your audience. So you could be very clear in your value proposition, like using this simple tactic we feel works. We help X to do X by X because of X. So an example of this is teaching at the right level is an evidence-backed educational approach that helps children develop basic reading and mathematics skills, opening doors to a brighter future. So we connect and you let us know what you do, why you do it, and what is the immediate outcome. Provides a lot of context. Yeah, again, as a general rule, try to keep the items on your slides as much as possible. Keep it to between 3 to 5 items. Next. Yeah, so this is more about engagement and bringing your audience into the story. So rather than having your presentation heavily talking about you, you want to involve the audience. So instead of saying things like "I saw this all the time," you could involve your audience by saying "you see this all the time." So these are just language support that could help your audience feel more engaged to the story. So less of what this person is talking about, but something that involves every person in the audience and something they could see, they could place themselves in that picture. So instead of when I spoke to other CEOs, I learned that you could have when you speak to other CEOs, you learn that. So that's another example. Next slide. Yeah, finally, use dialogue in present tense. Again, brings a lot of urgency to your conversation. It's not when you talk about something important, you let people know this is not something that has happened in the past and people have moved on from it. So obviously there are cases where you have to do that, but as much as possible, let the people who are listening to you know this is something that is happening right now and something needs to be done about it very quickly. I think this is hugely important when you're talking to the funders because they feel, okay, this is not something we could easily just pass on. This is something that we have to listen to now and make decisions on right now. So bringing that level of urgency into your presentation helps your audience be at alert and see the sense of why they need to take action with you right away. So those are the 3 final tips I have, and we'll be happy to listen to questions from here.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes before we end. So anybody sort of have any key questions at this point? And that can be about the interview setup or any of the storytelling concepts. So anything, any burning questions?
I have one.
Yeah, I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right, mine is fairly simple, actually. You shared the template for the presentation, but you shared it in PDF. Will you share that in PowerPoint as well, so it's easier for us to make it our own?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that. We'll do that today.
Yeah, I had 2 questions. One was just similar to Deborah, the design of the template. Should we use our own design? Should we keep it exactly the same as it is? Like how much leverage or movement do we have there?
Honestly, do what's most comfortable, and we just gave you that template just to give you an overall structure of like how you could sort of structure the beginning, middle, and end. I would follow the beginning, middle, and end structure that we've given you, but if you've got your own templates, and it's nicer when you've got your own logo, make it personal, etc. So yeah, if you feel comfortable slotting in information to the template, go ahead, but if you want to do it on your own template, again, go ahead. There's no rules on that particular component.
Okay, my second question is just, should we be coming to the one-on-one interviews with our stories sort of formed for feedback or our PowerPoint done for feedback? Just how much prep should we be doing before that?
Ideally, if you want us to have, some proper feedback on your presentation, I would try to get it done. Remember your interview slots are going to come in next week, and that's based on your availability. And we will do these one-on-ones, even if it's a day before your interview, we will do it. So yeah, it's really up to you what you think is most useful. If you think the story piece, you want to get feedback specifically on the story piece, we can do that. But if you prefer to have full feedback on the full thing, then we will also do that. And we're gonna try and be as flexible as possible, and give you our time so you can really make sure that your presentation is where you want it to be.
I have a question.
Great, thank you.
2 questions.
Yep.
May I go here? Yeah. So I want to understand, how will the panel work? There's 6 people being shown on the artifact that you've sent us. Will all the 6 be on the panel, right? Or will there be some of them on the panel? How is that being structured?
Sorry, Shivapriya, do you mind just repeating that? The line isn't super clear.
I'm very sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
So the application pack showed 6 people on the panel. Now I want to understand, will all these 6 people be on the panel? With basically Vitol, UBS, Jacobs, will all of them be on the panel? Or
No, so
will that be?
Carry on, sorry.
Yeah. So, or will there be like 2 or 3 or 1? And if so, will we be told who all will be in your panel? That's number 1. Number 2, I want to understand what is the scoring pattern, the scoring framework for the interview. In the application pack, there was a very clear scoring chart that was mentioned for all the sections. Now, what would that be for the interview? I think it said interview has a 10% scoring weight in the initial application pack. So where does it, is it still the same? If not, how will the interview be? What is the framework for scoring by the interviews? Because they also come from different funder groups. What is the alignment on scoring there? If you could share that.
Yeah, sure. So you will be interviewed by only one IC member, but they will be sort of doing deliberations. So they will be filling out a scorecard and making notes and then having deliberations about all of you. So they will be the final people selecting. We wanted to have like a full pitch sort of situation, but it's impossible to get that done when we're all on Zoom and we've got so many people presenting. So just to repeat, that's one person from the IC, one person from GSF that will interview you, and then there will be deliberation meetings where information and feedback will be shared, and they will then make the decisions.
So just a question for clarity, Kiran. Yes. One GSF member and one IC member, 2 people on the panel.
Yes.
And will we be told prior to the meeting who those people are?
Yes.
Going to be?
So,
okay.
Yes. So you will know next week.
Great. That is helpful. Also, is 6 slides a hard stop?
It's not a hard stop, but just so that you make sure that you make that 10 minutes, I think it might be a good place to stop, but not a hard stop. If you're one of those people that puts like one thing on a slide, you can go as many as you want.
Because 10 minutes is anyway short, because there's so many components to cover: sustainability, funding, the story, the problem. So I think I was just thinking how to crunch it up and still have a story in 10 minutes.
It's definitely a challenge. I can send you, if it'd be useful, I can send you average pitches, so pitches that have been done in that particular amount of time. To be honest, some pitches are done.
That will be helpful. That will be very helpful. That will be very helpful if you could share that.
Okay.
Yeah, and also I don't know if it's possible to share that with us, but the scoring chart or the scoring framework, if that could be shared, it just gives us visibility on what should we focus on when we present in full transparency, right?
Yeah. I will share the slides. So we do have a rubric in terms of like how, but we don't want to give you everything. It's gonna. We will give you an overview of what it looks like. So just remember that they're not. So the presentation is your opportunity to really engage. And it's the opportunity to demonstrate that you really understand your problem. So that's kind of the desirability element that I was talking about. But the things that are going to be we're going to be really focusing on, obviously the desirability is core, it's important, very, very, very important. But we're really looking at that feasibility and that viability component. So if we talk about viability, it's your organizational's ability to sustain itself, as well as the innovation's ability to sustain itself. So that's more looking at the funding side of stuff. And the feasibility is your organizational strength and what you've achieved thus far with this particular innovation. I will share these slides, and that's sort of broken down in a couple of slides earlier. If that's not as clear enough, we can share a more condensed version of the rubric as well.
Definitely. That's very helpful, Kiran. Thanks so much. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? We have about 3 minutes left.
Hi, Kiran. Sorry, I posted one question on budget. I can just repeat it if that's.
Yeah, go for it.
So I just wanted to, so will the presentation and the interview be the best place to make a case for how we want to spend the flexible grant, because there's only so much detail that we could actually give in the application, and there is some mention of it in the budget that we're sharing, but yeah, just.
Yeah, so you will, as I said, you'll be submitting your budgets to us, and they're going to be reviewed prior by the IC. But if in that last slide, in your ending slide, if there are specific things that you want to mention, I would refer. So you could just say, please have a look at our budget line, whatever, and this is how we intend to spend X. If there's something that you really want to talk to in detail, and I'm pretty sure you're going to get questions about the budget as well.
Yeah, sure. And so just to follow up questions on that one, on the money that that applicants are required to allocate for external evaluation, it'll be a high level estimate at the moment, because it needs to be the scope and the extent of external evaluation would need to be worked with GSF. And I'm sure, I mean, yeah, so is that okay? And the level of detail that's expected in the budget at the moment, and the timelines, because I think it's quite flexible in terms of how you want to spend it over 2 years, 1 year. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're completely right. So the funding itself, the majority of it is flexible, and there's approximately sort of 30 to 40% that will be specific to MEL-based activity. As you know, and as we've said right from the beginning, we're super, super keen on ensuring we can empower organizations to build better MEL-based structures within their organizations, because, and this is going to be supportive and helpful for any future funding. So if you think about the funding community today, they're moving in a direction where we're thinking more about outcome-based financing. So Jacobs is doing this, a lot of other organizations are doing this, and they really are leaning on organizations like us to help build MEL capacity in sort of school networks, etc. So that's the reason it's got such a heavy MEL piece, is because generally the funding community is moving into this kind of outcomes-based funding arena, if you like. But yes, you want to acknowledge and you want to demonstrate that you love this idea and you're excited about it building MEL into your organization.
Yeah, but we could we could still make a case for let's say of the 40%, 10% going to internal MEL, because there is merit for Absolutely
you can. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Perfect. Well, I think we are at time. As I said, you will hear from Habib and I next week with your interview slots. We will send out a recording of this workshop, as well as the slides, as well as the non-PDF version of the template to everybody. So you've got that, but please, if you've got any questions or you want to sort of discuss anything, don't be shy, get in touch. We're happy to answer any questions and help you sort of get through this interview. But yeah, thanks guys for joining, and thank you for your attention. I know workshops aren't easy online.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye.